Welcome to the Cult of Dusty. I'm your host, Dusty the White. And if you guys have been watching Leah Remini's Scientology show on A&E, there's some crazy ass shit on this show, man. Basically, for those of you who don't know, Leah Remini is a pretty famous actress. She was on Saved by the Bell for a while, and was on Cheers, and was on King of Queens for a long time. And she's one of the poster girls for Scientology. One of the girls they tried out over and over again to show how awesome Scientology is. And she's been shilling for Scientology for years and years and years and years. Until a few years ago, one day she woke up and realized, oh fuck, I'm in a cult. And I actually kind of feel a connection with her about what she's doing. Because I had a similar thing happen to me when one day I woke up and realized I had been in the cult of Christianity all my life. And me and her kind of have the same mentality about it. A no man left behind mentality. You know, we gotta go back and rescue all those people in the cult by speaking out about the cult and exposing it. So one thing Leah's decided to do is to go around and interview a bunch of the head people from Scientology who have left the organization and now are speaking out about it. And the first person she interviews is Amy Scobie, who was actually in charge of the Scientology Celebrity Center, which their main purpose, obviously, was to con as many celebrities as they could to joining Scientology. Because ultimately, Scientology is just a business, and if you have a bunch of free celebrity endorsers, that's a great way to get new business. But way before she actually formed the Celebrity Center, this girl, Amy Scobie, actually joined Scientology when she was 14 years old. They made her lie to her father and tell her father that she had a modeling gig overseas and she was going to go do that, while she was actually joining the Sea Organization, which is basically just L. Ron Hubbard's creepy floating playground where he could do whatever he wanted to in international waters and not get busted by the cops. And when she joined this creepy-ass Sea Organization, they made her sign a billion-year contract of service. Because what Scientology teaches is that you live multiple lives, and spreading Scientology is the most important thing you do in all those lives, and so you want to commit every one of those lives to spreading Scientology at least for 1 billion years. And because you live so many lives, they teach that your personal relationships are not important. Yes, your mom is your mom in this lifetime, but next lifetime it'll be somebody else, and the next lifetime it'll be somebody else, and same with your father, and husbands and wives and children. All those relationships don't really matter. The important thing is Scientology, spreading Scientology and focusing all your attention upon that, which is actually a really fucking brilliant business model if you're trying to start a cult, which is exactly what L. Ron Hubbard was doing. So anyway, how they got away with doing this is they made these kids write what they call good roads letters home to their parents, telling their parents that they were fine and happy and wanted to be there, just to keep their parents from calling the cops and busting the whole thing. And that was the only outside communication they were allowed to have. So this woman spends all her formative years in Scientology and works her way up the ranks and becomes one of the most important people in Scientology. And eventually they had her set up the Celebrity Center. And she talks about how one of her main jobs was making sure Tom Cruise is surrounded at all times by Scientologists. They want nobody around him ever that's not a Scientologist. So it's basically the freak show you would imagine when you think about him, with people folding his laundry that are Scientologists, and Scientologists mowing his lawn, Scientologists bringing him iced tea while he sits in his fucking chair. Basically Scientologists sucking his dick 24/7. And I actually ain't really hating on Cruise about it, because that sounds pretty fucking cool to me. But by this time, L. Ron Hubbard had died, and the dude second in line who took over this cult and ran it as a dictator was David Miscavige. And David Miscavige was basically like the Pope of Scientology. He was almost like a supernatural being to these people. But here's the thing. Dude's a dick. Big time. He's got little man syndrome or something. So when anybody ever says or does anything he doesn't like or even looks at him wrong, he like beats the fucking shit out of him. And they let him because he's the fucking Pope of Scientology. What you gonna do? You gotta sit there and take that shit. Well anyway, this woman watches him beat the fuck out of people over and over and over again. And eventually starts questioning shit. Like, why is this dude beating the fuck out of everybody? We're supposed to be the good guys here. Why is the fucking Pope of Scientology such a shithead? And it's actually really interesting to see these people wake up and realize they're in a cult. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's like, oh, fuck, it's so obvious now. What the fuck was I thinking? You feel so stupid for not seeing it before, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can only rationalize the bullshit to yourself for so long once you allow yourself to start questioning it. So as she began to question, obviously the church can't fucking have that shit, so they punished her by sending her to a rehabilitation camp called the Rehabilitation Project Force, which is basically like boot camp where they make you run and do push-ups and jumping jacks and shit like that all day long, mixed with manual labor. So in a lot of ways, it was actually worse than fucking prison. And of course, my visceral reaction to that is, fuck that shit! Why did those idiots just fucking leave? They could have left any time or try to get out or call the cops. But actually, the more you think about it, the more empathy I have with these people, and I sort of get it. Basically, this girl has been in this cult since she was 14 years old. She has no job except for what the cult is giving her. They bought the food for her whole life. They've employed her whole life. They've even taken care of her medical needs her whole life. She has nothing but that church. And if she leaves that church, she has nobody. No money, no friends, no family, nothing. You start over with zero. So it's actually a lot harder to overcome than you might think. Well, eventually, she met her husband at this place. And her and him were just basically like, we're getting the fuck out of here. You guys can shoot us in the head or you can let us go, one or the other. And they finally got set free. So the first thing she does is she contacts her dad, who was not into Scientology at all, who knew that he had lost his daughter to this cult and was so happy to get her back. And her mom, who was still into Scientology, she went to her mom's house immediately and tried to reconnect with her. Well, while she was there, Scientology sent their police force, they called the ethics officers, to question her mom. And so this girl had to hide in the bathroom for hours while the ethics officers tried to convince her mom that she was an evil person, a suppressive person, which is like the most evil you can be in Scientology, and told her mom she had to disconnect from her, which basically means shun her and never have anything to do with her again. And eventually her mom agreed and said, yeah, I will shun her, won't have anything to do with her anymore. Like a fucking bitch. But I know that's mean of me, because thinking about it from her side, I know she really thought she was doing the right thing. She probably really believed in Scientology and thought by giving her daughter the cold shoulder, it would make her eventually come around and help her out. So she probably had good intentions, even though she was a fucking idiot. But anyway, she disconnects from her daughter. Her daughter loses her mom, loses everything. But eventually her mom gets really depressed about abandoning her daughter. And so she says, fuck Scientology. They're obviously an evil organization if they're keeping me from being with the one I love. So fuck them, I'm leaving. And ever since then, her and her mom have been speaking out against Scientology and trying to help other people get away from the cult. But obviously, leaving fucking Scientology and get away from the cult is a fucking no-no. So what Scientology does is they have these people who are in charge of smearing you and destroying your life. They call it fair gaming, which means anything they have to do to destroy you is fair game. You spoke out against the church, you're an evil person, you need to be stopped by any means necessary. So they set out to smear her and her mom. The dude who was actually in charge of smearing people who talk about the church, his name was Mike Render, who is the second person Leah interviews, who's actually not in Scientology anymore, is out and telling exactly what the fuck he did while he was in there. So Mike Render was the spokesman for Scientology for 20 years, and he was in charge of fair gaming people. This guy joined the Sea Org at 18 years old and was in the main inner circle of L. Ron Hubbard, so he's one of the main ones that knows what the fuck was going on in this organization. So anyway, eventually he was head of public relations and in charge of smearing people. Anybody the church labeled a suppressive personality. That's basically anybody that questions the fucking church, and if you do that, fuck you, we can do anything to you and get away with it. And this is one of the dudes that David Miscavige would beat the shit out of. This dude says he let David Miscavige, the Pope of Scientology, basically beat him between 50 to 100 times and didn't do shit about it. And when asked why he didn't do anything, he's like, well, it's the Pope of Scientology. If he's beating you, you just assume you did something to deserve it, and you just rationalize it to yourself however you have to. And I guess I can kind of understand that, but at the same time, this is just me. Fuck that shit. If Jesus himself came back down here and punched me in the face, I think I'd have to whoop some Jesus' ass. That's just me though. Well, apparently this dude, Mike Render, was in charge of the public image of Scientology, and the lead dude of Scientology didn't think he was doing a good job, got pissed off at him, so basically sent him to a place called The Hole, which is more of this boot camp type prison shit. This dude's basically like Kim Jong-il. Anybody who looked at him wrong or spoke to him wrong or fell asleep at the wrong time was sent to a re-education camp where they made them beat each other until they confessed to the crimes they committed. So anyway, they had this dude in the hole for 2 years, and eventually he gets sick of it and says, fuck this shit, and escapes. So because he escaped, the first thing they do is take his whole family away from him. Because he's raised his children in Scientology all their lives, they now believe in the cult more than they believe in him. And when the cult tells them that he's an evil person, he's a suppressive person, and you have to disconnect from him, that's exactly what they do. He loses his entire family, his wife of 31 years, his kids, fucking the whole thing gone because he stood up and questioned the cult. Then, of course, he started speaking out about the cult. So they did exactly the same thing to him that he did to other people. Fair gaming them and trying to ruin their lives for speaking out. And basically they released footage with all his family, calling him evil and every name they could think of. His brother, his daughter, his ex-wife, all of them shredding this guy who spent his entire life furthering Scientology. But suddenly, because he's speaking out against Scientology, he's now one of the most evil people who ever lived. And basically Scientology began stalking this dude. They rammed into him with their car. They basically follow him wherever he went, record him and scream at him. They actually stole his garbage. They told the garbage man that they were doing a drug bust on this guy. They basically bribed them to take the garbage and got busted red fucking handed for it. And even though they've taken his job, they've taken his family, they've done all this to him, they're still fucking harassing him to this day. He showed where they bought a house near his and put up surveillance cameras to record him in a birdhouse. And to me, it seems obvious that Scientology is dying. We're watching its death rows right now. I don't think they're going to have a lot of new people joining the cult, and I think they're going to have a lot of people leaving the cult, so it's eventually going to disintegrate. And I don't really believe Scientology is a great threat to any of us right now, but I actually really like this show and would like to promote this show, because I think the more Christians that see this show, the better. Because when you're watching it, it's so easy to say to yourself, that's obviously a cult. You're obviously all in cults. How could you not see that? How could you be so dumb? But the thing is, that's exactly how secular people feel about you Christians. Once you're out of it, it's so fucking obvious it was a cult all along, you wonder how you could not have seen it. It's very humbling, actually. You know how obvious it is to you Christians that Scientology is nothing more than a cult? That's exactly how obvious it is to us atheists that Christianity is a cult. It's the same type of ridiculous bullshit. The only difference is your bullshit is older. Hell, say what you want about Scientology, but at least it believes the earth is older than 6,000 years old. The stupid shit Scientologists believes is no dumber at all than the stupid shit you Christians believe. It's all as equally fucking stupid as each other. And obviously the same goes for Islam and every religion. It's just obvious made up bullshit. And everybody who's not in that particular cult can see it. You Christians can see it about Islam and Scientology. You Muslims can see it about Christianity and Scientology. You Scientologists can see it about Christianity and Islam. And us atheists can see it about all of you motherfuckers. And I really connect with one of the things Leah says about how she really didn't want to find out that what she's been doing her whole life was a lie. That's exactly how I felt. You know, what I've been doing my entire life is a fucking lie. Obviously, that's a thought that can make you pretty fucking angry if you let it. But instead, you just have to channel that anger into trying to help other people. So good job, Leah. I really commend that you were able to see through your poor programming, turn your back on all that bullshit, and embrace logic. Fuck yes! It's time to judge my soul. When it's time to pay that toll.